Okay, now let's look at rearranging formula. Rearranging a formula essentially means when you make a different term the subject. So for instance, to make a term the subject, your answer needs to be in the form of, let's say, y is equal to something from a formula that is saying 4y plus 12 is equal to x. So let's look at this one here. Make x the subject. So we have y is equal to 2x plus 5. So what we need to do is essentially solve the equation. Well, we're not really solving, we're making x the subject. Which way, I guess we're kind of solving in a way. So what we do first is we need to make the x's to be on one side and the y's and the rest of the numbers to be on the other side. So what we can do is try to eliminate this positive 5. So to eliminate the positive 5, essentially what you need to do is to do the opposite. So the opposite of adding is subtracting. So you're going to subtract 5 from both sides. So we end up with y minus 5 is equal to 2x. We want to know what x is, not what 2x is. So to eliminate that 2, because 2x is the same thing as 2 times by x, the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So we're going to divide both sides by 2. So we end up with y minus 5 all over 2. Remember, in a fraction, that line means divide is equal to x. So now we've made x the subject. Okay, let's look at this one here. So y is equal to 3x minus 4 over 2, and we have to make x the subject here. As a sort of rule of thumb, I'd say, we generally don't really like fractions too much. So if we can, we try to get rid of the fraction. And in order to get rid of the fraction, we always times by the denominator. So here, the denominator here is 2, so we're going to times both sides by 2 to get rid of the fraction, the denominator. So we end up with 2y, and when we get rid of the denominator, we are just left with the number at the top, so 3x minus 4. So now we need to get rid of that minus 4. The opposite of subtracting, or minusing, subtracting, is adding. So we're going to add 4 to both sides. So we get 2y is, plus 4 is equal to 3x. We want to know what x is, not what 3x is. The opposite, because this is 3 times by x, the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So we're going to divide both sides by 3. So we get 2y plus 4 all over 3 is equal to x. Now we've made x the subject. Now this one here, make x the subject for y is equal to the square root of 5x minus 3. First of all, what we need to do is get rid of that square root. The opposite of square rooting is squaring. So we're going to square both sides. So essentially we get y squared is equal to 5x minus 3. We need to eliminate that minus 3. So the opposite of subtracting 3 is adding 3. So we do that to both sides. We get y squared add 3 is equal to 5x. And then from there, we want to know what x is, not what 5x is. 5x is the same thing as saying 5 times by x. The opposite of timesing is dividing, so we're going to divide both sides by 5. So we get y squared plus 3 all over 5 is equal to x. Okay, this one here. So make u the subject. For v squared is equal to u squared plus 2as. Physics, this is actually a physics formula for equation, for you can use that for velocity and acceleration. S, I believe, is distance. I think S is distance. Yes. So to make u the subject, so v squared is equal to u squared plus 2as. So what we need to do first is get rid of this plus 2as. The opposite of adding is subtracting, so we're going to subtract 2as from both sides. So you get v squared minus 2as is equal to u squared. We want to know what u is, not what u squared is. So the opposite of squaring is square rooting. So we are going to square root v squared minus 2as, and that equals to u. Okay, this one here, we have to make x the subject. For this one, we've got two x's. We have an x at the top and an x at the bottom. So y is equal to 2x plus 1 all over x minus 3. As I said before, generally we try to get rid of the fraction where we can. And in order to get rid of a fraction, we have to times by whatever the denominator is. So for this instance, we're going to times by x minus 3 on both sides. So we get y times by x minus 3 is equal to 2x plus 1. So now what we're going to do here is we're going to expand the brackets on the left hand side. So y times by x, which is yx, and then y times by negative 3, which is negative 3y. It's equal to 2x plus 1. So now what we're going to do is anything that has an x in it is going to be on one side, and then all the rest are going to be on the other side. So what we can do is let's move this negative 3y from the left hand side to the right hand side. So in order to get rid of that negative 3y on the left hand side, you have to add 3y. Do the opposite. So we get yx is equal to 2x, add 1, add 3y. And to eliminate that 2x from the right hand side, because we want all the x, anything that contains an x in it, to be on one side. So we're going to subtract 2x from both sides. So we get yx minus 2x is equal to 1 plus 3y. So now what we're going to do is, you see the left hand side where we have yx minus 2x, we are going to factorize. So we have to work out what the highest common factor is, or essentially what they both have in common with each other. So they both have an x in common, so that's going to be outside our brackets. X times by y makes yx, and x times by negative 2 makes negative 2x, like so. So now what we're going to do, to get this x by itself, we need to eliminate this brackets y minus 2. So in order to do that, because this is actually essentially x times by y minus 2, we are going to divide both sides by y minus 2. So we end up with x is equal to 1 plus 3y all over y minus 2. And that is how we make x the subject. So let's look at this one here. Z is equal to 1 over x plus 5. First of all, we generally don't really like fractions, so we try to get rid of the fraction where possible. So we're going to times by the denominator, which is x. So when we times by x, we're timesing everything by x. So we times the left hand side by x is zx. When we times by x, we get rid of the x at the bottom, so we're left with 1. But we also have to times this 5 by x as well. So we get 5x. From here, what we're going to do is we are going to move anything that contains an x to one side. So let's move everything that contains the x's to the left hand side. So if we want to eliminate this 5x, positive 5x, we have to do the opposite by subtracting by 5x. So if we subtract by 5x on both sides, we get zx minus 5x is equal to 1. And then now we're going to look at the left-hand side. We need to figure out what is our, well, we are essentially going to factorize here. So in order to factorize, we work out what our highest common factor is. So essentially what they have in common with each other. Zx and negative 5x have an x in common with each other. So that's going to be on the outside. X times by z makes zx, and x times by negative 5 makes negative 5x. So now to get that x by itself, we need to eliminate this bracket z minus 5, close bracket. And in order to do that, we have to divide. So essentially do the opposite. So we are dividing by z minus 5 on both sides. So we end up with x is equal to 1 all over z minus 5.